Breaking this morning, the Supreme Court of the United States has ruled to overturn Roe v. Wade, eliminating the constitutional right to abortion. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm News 8 digital anchor Luke Laster here from the Wood TV live desk, here to break things down for what this means moving forward now when discussing abortions in America. WMU Cooley Law constitutional law professor Michael McDaniel. Mr. McDaniel, good morning.
Good morning, Luke. Thanks for having me.
So let's dive right in here and explain so everyone can understand what is happening here. Let's start with the decision on the Dobbs versus Jackson case. Can you please explain that and what that meant for Roe v. Wade?
Absolutely. So we have a clear majority of the Supreme Court who are basically saying that there is no fundamental liberty interest, nor even a personal right to an abortion. Now, they couch this, they phrase this as a matter of abortion. But since Roe v. Wade over 50 years ago, the issue has been, does a person have control over their own body? This issue of bodily integrity or bodily autonomy. And they've thrown that out. They've totally thrown that out, and they're looking at the phrase or the wording of abortion only. And they're saying, in essence, that we're looking at history within the United States going back to the time of at least the 14th Amendment. And so there's no clear law that permitted an abortion at that period of time. Again, they're rephrasing the issue from being one of, do you have a right of privacy to be free from government control as an individual, to whether this particular surgical practice should be barred or was previously permitted. And by doing so, they're going to change a lot of jurisprudence before the Supreme Court. Other opinions that, we talk about Roe versus Wade as the beginning, and we call it Roe v. Wade, even though Roe v. Wade isn't exactly the law of the land. That was changed to Casey versus Planned Parenthood a few years later, where the Supreme Court came up with a balance between a woman's need for bodily integrity versus the state's need to protect a life. And so when we talk about Roe v. Wade, what we're really talking about now, Luke, is the idea that you have a right of privacy, which is not spelled out in the Constitution, but which since the 1960s, the Supreme Court has said is inherent within the Constitution. By changing the focus to looking at an activity rather than focusing on a general right, the Supreme Court, I think, is signaling that this right of privacy is under attack, which means we're going to have much more, or we could have much more federal regulation over things that we thought that the state had to stay away from.
So explain some of those, what in terms of that federal regulation, where could we see it and what could we see?
Right. So the first case really wasn't Roe v. Wade. The first case was a case called Griswold versus Connecticut, which recognized that there was a right of privacy that individuals had where the government could not interfere. And that case dealt with a Connecticut law which prohibited the sale of condoms to a married couple. And that law was held to be unconstitutional. That Connecticut law was unconstitutional based upon, this right of privacy. So then Roe v. Wade was saying, well, if there's a right of privacy that says we don't want the government in our marital bedroom, then the Roe v. Wade says, well, we don't want the government interfering with decisions between a woman and her doctor, including whether or not to terminate an unwanted pregnancy. And it's built from that all the way to the more recent cases dealing with gay marriage. They're all on the same thread of bodily autonomy, that you have a right to control your body and what you do with it and how you express yourself through your body, that the government cannot and should not interfere with. So this is the first brick, but it's like Jenga. It's one of the bricks at the bottom that is toppling this whole right of privacy that everyone believes in, but which the Supreme Court has just now today put in doubt.
You mentioned Jenga there, and I think that's a good transition into how that impacts the state level. Let's hone in on Michigan itself. What will we see here in Michigan?
So we've got a law from back in the 1930s, which specifically says that it's a crime for anyone to perform an abortion that's not a doctor. And that's me taking the law as written by the legislature and then the Michigan Supreme Court decision on that law. That law may be now in control, or later laws may be in control, which said that you had a right to abortion and still exists, saying you have a right to abortion in Michigan, but with lots of controls and steps that you had to go through first. So we're going to have a question as to whether or not the Michigan law is automatically overruled, or whether the other way around, whether the Michigan law automatically comes back in force, takes force, is in effect, is now the law because of the repeal of Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, or whether or not the subsequent Michigan law is still in effect. So we're going to have a bit of a discussion there, and there's already a court case filed by Governor Whitmer saying that the Michigan law has been overruled by subsequent events, or that the Michigan Constitution's due process clause is broader than the due process clause in the U.S. Constitution on which this right of privacy is based. And there is some previous Michigan Supreme Court precedent for that, Luke. In a recent case, the Michigan Supreme Court said that there was a right of privacy, a right to be left alone under the Michigan due process clause in one of the cases involving plaintiffs from the Flint water crisis. So that is at least one decision and one statement by the Michigan Supreme Court, which is broader than the statements we now have from the U.S. Supreme Court. And if that holds up, then Michigan will still have some right to abortion separate from, based upon the Michigan Constitution, separate from what the U.S. Supreme Court has said today.
So this decision, this has been in the headlines for several months now. Today just is the actual decision where it was made. Was this a matter of time?
It sure seems like it, doesn't it? From what I've seen in this opinion and the new opinion, I haven't been able to compare word for word, page by page with the opinion that was leaked in May, as you noted. But it sure looks to be very, very, very similar to me. So I think it was a matter of Chief Justice Roberts, who controls the docket as the Chief Justice, wanting to try and find another voice, another justice with him to come up with a more narrow opinion, just as he did yesterday in the Second Amendment case. And when I saw that, I was hopeful that maybe Roberts would do that here, where you would uphold this law that's at stake here with the 15 weeks as the time under which you could no longer have an abortion, but still preserve the right of privacy under Roe v. Wade. And the reason I was hoping for that, obviously, is because this right of privacy, or more precisely, this right of bodily integrity, as I said, affects a lot of other avenues of our lives and a lot of other conduct that we go through in terms of how we take care of ourselves and how we express ourselves. So there's a number of decisions the previous decisions of the Supreme Court, and a number of recognized what we consider rights to do what we want with our own body, which could now be in jeopardy as a result of this opinion. And that's why it's so important that this case that Governor Whitmer filed before the Michigan Supreme Court is considered very soon. And I think, given this opinion today, it will be.
So stepping back kind of on the national scale of it all, what happens next? Where do we go? The weekend will go, the headlines will be there. What happens on Monday? Then what happens 3 months from now, 6 months, and moving forward?
Right. Well, I'm not good as a seer of the future, but I would say that we're going to have a weekend. Sunday morning, all the news shows are going to be all about this, and then there's got to be a cold, hard look as to where we are exactly as a nation. There's some 60 to 70% of Americans that have been polled say that they think that there should be, whether they agree with it or not, they think that a woman should have a choice over her own body. And I think that could have an effect politically on midterm elections and on local elections in certain states. So I think that politically there's going to be a calculus here as to a recalculus as to the effect of this opinion and how far we really as a people want to go. The Supreme Court is appointed applying standards from 200 years ago and saying this is the standard that needs to be applied. I mean, the opinion almost literally says there's no abortion written into the Constitution, and there was no right to an abortion at the time that the Constitution was passed, nor at the time of the 14th Amendment. So it doesn't exist. Whereas as a people, we have evolved, and we've evolved in terms of medical procedures and standards and our understanding and I'm much more, I thought, open on our religious beliefs. So I think there's going to be a political calculus here, both at the national level and then at the state level. And some states, I think, are going to rejoice that Roe v. Wade has been overturned, and others are going to say, well, we need to figure out what this means. So I think that there's going to be a very close analysis in many, many states as to what their state laws pre-Roe v. Wade said or may say on this, and really fly-specking them. You know, you can have an abortion induced by pharmacology, by drugs. You know, is that prohibited, or is the ancient language of some of this pre-existing statutes, does it only talk about actions by a doctor or by a midwife or a non-doctor? So there's going to be a lot of really close consideration of what individual state laws say. And then there's going to be a debate, hopefully, among the people as to whether those laws should be changed and which way they should be changed, whether to make some form of abortion available in the early weeks, or whether or not we should continue with an entire ban.
You just made a brief mention of it there. Going by state here, obviously, we're going to hone in on Michigan, but what does this mean for places now like Planned Parenthood or those medical facilities?
Right. Well, we don't know for certain. Again, it's going to depend upon the laws of each individual state, whether or not they're going to be able to stay open. At some point, I think there has to be a debate of whether this wreaks such an economic hardship on some individuals that it is going to be considered punitive or overstepping by state law. And don't know the answer at this point. Those are debates we have to have.
Professor McDaniel, we appreciate you taking the time here. Is there anything else that you would like to make a mention of? You know, this news obviously very fresh, very new. You know, this will be a very interesting weekend to say the least. But is there anything else that you'd like to make mention of?
Just for, I would ask all your viewers to be as objective and analytic as political as possible, and think not just about the narrow decision here in terms of what they did, but the effect that it's going to have on other aspects of our life. As I said, there's a number of areas that could be affected if you take away this unenumerated but inherent right of privacy, which is really the right for the government to leave us alone. And I think almost all Americans agree that unless we have specifically given our government through our representatives the power to do something, then they're supposed to leave us alone. And this is a step in the other direction. This is saying that the government can come in and affect somebody against their will in ways which some may agree with, but that's not really the point. The larger point is that you're giving, through the Supreme Court decision, you're giving the government the ability to interfere in the most private affairs we might have, in the marital bedroom, if you will.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you tuned in maybe halfway through the stream or just now clicking in, there's a link attached here. It takes you over to woodtv.com. You're able to view our full conversation and the latest there on this overturning, again, on woodtv.com. Professor McDaniel, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Luke.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a look at the Wood TV Live Desk. I'm News 8 digital anchor Luke Laster. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you around. Thank you.